Floor horses, follows the guy.
Thank you. I'm good at horses. So my gift to you today is going to be the business of security. So there are people in this room, Akamai, everything's Akamai. There are people in this room. There's people in this room who've forgotten more about security than I ever learned, because my background is a little bit different. I'm a lifelong entrepreneur. And after having a general up here this morning, I wish this slide wasn't here, but I'm gonna tell you a minute about what qualifies me to be up here. I'm actually the Chief Information Security Officer of an investment group called Sequel3. TierPoint is one of 7 companies that I act as the CISO of. So what brought me here? Lifelong entrepreneur. So I'll talk at the end of this about my first introduction to Carl when I was doing human behavioral studies. And my background is in human behavioral studies. And I happened to grow and get a patent on PTSD testing in a digitized format for soldiers coming back from battle. Who here has served in the military? Thank you. And it's not me throwing flowers. I genuinely owe you my way of life. I'm a big fan of military. What was happening with the Stroop procedure is that it was an analog procedure, and humans have biases, and my background is in human behavior. So it was an analog pen and paper test, and soldiers would come back from battle, and the issue was that there were soldiers who were very good at understanding how this process would be played, and they could fake and game the system and get benefits they were not entitled to. And then there were soldiers who had so many issues coming back from battle that they wouldn't present well. And it's an awful way to think about presenting well when you've seen active battle and you're a person in need, but they may not present well. And humans have biases. Oh, you're wearing the blue striped shirt. Nah, my brother-in-law wears that shirt. I hate my brother-in-law. So I've already established some level of bias for you coming in the room based on something basically out of your control. So we digitized the entire thing. We made a lie detector on steroids, skin conductance, brainwave activity, eye activity. We went through, and after 3 years of development, we were literally issued a patent, and 90 days after I got my patent, Harvard University, Harvard Bioscience, their commercial arm, bought my company based on that patent. And it started me down a career of integration for the government. So I was working with VA hospitals and doing integrations, which led to some of the work we did carried over to the Department of Defense. And then we started another company to do integrations on behalf of the Department of Defense. And we ended up doing quite well with that business also. And we grew that company and sold it. And we ended up needing to build secure infrastructure, especially in Pennsylvania. And I was retired. I had a life event when I was young, and I was blessed. And I was too young to retire, so we had worked with a company, a little data center company in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania called DBSI. And he said, "You've built this secure infrastructure within our data center. Can you do it again?" Sure, why not? So he said, "Come to work with me." And so I took a little salary, took some stock. We grew that company and we sold it to a company called Xand, which was a large regional player in the Northeast. Again, I came over as an officer, and Xand said, "Can we grow these security and compliance programs and kind of try and lead the infrastructure growth in the Northeast?" Sure. So we did it again. And we grew that company and we sold it to a company called TierPoint. And strangely enough, Sequel3, who is who I work for, we weren't even going to take their meeting. We got a call from this venture group out in St. Louis, and they said, "We know you're putting the book on the market. We would like to participate." And we're like, "Who the hell's Sequel3, right?" We had never heard of them. And they came, they flew out, and it was an amazing handshake. So we ended up selling to TierPoint. I came along as an officer, and then I moved quickly into being one of the investors and officers for the holding company. And again, TierPoint is one of 7 companies that I represent. And my favorite business ever is cigars. So those of you who know me personally, I'm a huge cigar fan. My humidor at home, much to my wife's chagrin, is bigger than 2 of these signs. So I have about 3,500 cigars sitting in the house. Drives my wife nuts. I did some work in the Dominican Republic. We ended up rolling our own blend. The blends, I thought they were good, but actually they were not that great, I was told. But I thought they were good, but a large cigar company came and said, your logo is genius. And we love the logo. The cigars, we don't think they're great. We're going to remake them, but we want to buy the logo. It was a little bit butthurt, right? So come on, I don't think they're that bad, but they bought the logo and we cashed out after 18 months. We became the #3 new release for a large cigar importer. So we had a good time. And if the cigars were not that great, but the logo was good, it's why I'm in business. So we ended up capitalizing on that. So let's talk about the business, some of the business of security. And I'm going to talk to you about TierPoint. And I'm a shameless self-promoter, but I'm not going to be up here to shamelessly self-promote. I'm going to build a story and I'm going to share with you some of the biases and some of the issues that we have in the business of security, especially in the managed security space, managed service provider space. And as I build this story, you're going to understand my relationship with Corero now and what brought us there. So TierPoint, we're large, we have 42, 43 now data centers around the country. We invest heavily in our own dark fiber. We literally light it ourselves. So we're not building another cloud. We're not doing things that are that level of differentiation in the market. We have built an ecosystem in order to securely move data, both for our government contracts. Our biggest vertical is hospital and high density compute hosting for AI. If you think of 10 AI companies that are out there in the market, I think 8 of them are in my data centers and 6 of them are in my data centers exclusively. We have become the leader in the United States of hosting AI models. And we used to buy data centers, and if I had 10 megawatts, it was like, I'll never use any 10 megawatts. I'm never going to fill it. Now we don't even look at data centers that can't guarantee 100 megawatts in order to support that level of growth. So we have certain data centers, key data centers that have unique cooling and power and redundancy, and those are some of the natural places that these businesses land. So we've had some good growth. In fact, this year I think we're projecting 160+% growth in our ecosystem based on some of our new models. You know what we're not growing in is security. So I'm still, no matter how much I put into this, I'm still a cost center. Like I literally still go into my budget season with my hat out and go, please, can we have more security? Like it's just not something that the MSP space has adopted the way that we would want. But as we grow this out, you sort of hit this inflection point where you kind of wake up one morning and you're like, oh, we could be an MSSP because we have this backbone in this ecosystem. And instead of just having this inherent built-in security that we give away for free, there's some opportunities here to start growing that next level. And it's an opportunity that we explored for, I think, 10 years with my last DDoS provider. And we're still a cost center. So let's kind of go in. So to your point, we have some big logos and we're a big company and I'm proud of who I work for. The high density hosting, one of the secrets to this is having cabinets that can do self-contained liquid cooled built-in radiators. We used to sell 150 watts a square foot on the raised floor. Now we have cabinets that are so dense that we can't put them on a raised floor. We have to literally bolt them to the concrete, and we're doing 700 watts a cabinet at this point with intense cooling. In fact, the market became so hot so fast that we think the best cabinet maker in the world for these AI hosting was a company called Scale Matrix out of San Diego. Lots of patents, integrated cooling, huge cooling infrastructure. In fact, for a 50,000 square foot deployment, I have to have 30,000 gallons of cooled, always chilled with glycol reserve in case we lose power to keep these things running for the 10 minutes it takes to shut them down. 30,000 gallons just to shut them off safely. So it's been quite a good run. But let me tell you about what matters to me. So as part of being an entrepreneur and part of why I'm standing here in front of you today is because, again, the business of security is not always about, in my opinion, my humble opinion, it's not always about how bleeding edge are we with these products. I don't want to go and be that bleeding edge product person. I want to be the bleeding edge business owner, officer who partners with the right people. And that partnership starts, in my opinion, with a handshake and being a person of your word. And I can tell you, in 30 years of being an entrepreneur, I have made mistakes and I've had failures, and it's never once been because I didn't keep my word on a handshake. If we shake hands and we say something's going to happen, whether the contract states it or not, we live and die by our words. At least we're supposed to. It used to work that way. So we looked at, as we looked at orchestration and remediation across my ecosystem, again, not to sell, just to keep TierPoint out of the newspaper. We have 5,000 clients across 44 data centers, and the amount of data that we were ingesting is not just network data. It is telemetry data, cooling data, infrastructure data, power. We have so many additional layers, that all of which were diverse networks, and all of which mandated that we had some sort of centralized system in order to understand the security risks associated with all of this large infrastructure. And on top of those security risks, what do we do with it? How much data are we going to ingest, and what are we going to look at across those large ecosystems? So we looked at 7 or 8 large providers, every name you would recognize in this market. In fact, one of the providers we had an investment in, and the CEO of that orchestration, remediation, SOAR, SIM company was very put off that we weren't going with them. And he made the challenge to Jerry Kent, my boss, that we're more secure than all of them. I dare your team to try and hack us. So we hacked them. We not only hacked them, but we took over their infrastructure. We renamed all of their naming conventions Hey Kool-Aid, and we sent emails to ourselves with the password of, oh yeah. And so that ended up getting back, and it was a thing. So Jerry was pissed. And we were laughing, and he threw down, but my point was made. We didn't go with them. And so when we were looking at an ecosystem as large as ours, how many endpoints, how many client endpoints, what is the assumption of security? I had started to draw on a napkin. Like, it's not an Amazon story, but I was literally drawing out, how can we just do, I don't want to spend Splunk money and these things. We're looking at 3, 4, 500,000 a month for an ecosystem our size. To see all of this. How is that possible? Design me something that is ingesting this. And my team was like, oh yeah, you need Elastic. I'm like, I don't know, I just like, I don't want to do all these things. It has to be this, it has to be integrated. And my team was like, we're going to do it in Elastic. And I said, I don't know what Elastic is, but show me how you're going to do this system. And like a month later, they came back and they said, yeah, we're going with Elastic. And here's some of the things we're looking at. So over the course of the last 2 years, again, it's not a product. It's what we decided to develop internally in order to see the lay of the land in the ecosystem for, again, our large setup. And so we're looking at all the things you can imagine. We're getting all the threat feeds. We need to correlate everything, and all of it needs to be done in an efficient, easy manner. And the most efficient, easy manner, I heard this said 100 times today, is to have some level of API integration, because I don't want to keep writing custom ingestion scripts. And we have Elastic programmers and we have Python programmers, and we ended up going with vendors who would allow us the most visibility and the ability to orchestrate and make decisions without having to have one of my SOC personnel have to review every single event. And so we started to do other levels of integration, table stakes, and it is table, it's antivirus, anti-malware, it's all the things that my clients would expect. Of course you're looking at this, but it's not as simple as, of course you're looking at this when you are the landlord and the heartbeat and the infrastructure provider for 5,000 plus clients across multiple verticals. And all of them have a whole different level of security and compliance mandates. Our biggest vertical, now it's AI, but our biggest verticals were healthcare and legal infrastructure. And we have most of the large pharma companies are within our ecosystem doing disaster recovery and using us for their business continuity. And every one of them wants to know, how are you supporting the backbone and looking at the backbone of your infrastructure, because whether we like it or not, you're touching our ecosystem in some way. So we had to prove what we were looking at and why we were looking at it. So we just kept adding modules, and it's not as simple as just adding a module. It's adding a module with 60 data providers in every single region that we're looking to mix and provide higher end infrastructure back to our clients, and all of the system monitoring and all the telemetry, and everybody's got a tiny little hole poked in my firewalls in order to make sure that they're getting the data they need to provide the service level agreements that we've signed on to on behalf of TierPoint. So it has sort of morphed over and over to, well, we announce our own DNS, and now we have all these DNS servers that we need to be aware of. And we're not clicking. We're clicking. And then of course, the low-hanging fruit of email. Like, all right, so we're in O365 and we have all these other Microsoft security layers. How does my email ecosystem and how do attacks across that layer, how do I correlate that to what I'm seeing within my ecosystem based on denial of service and my FortiGate infrastructure and all of these other correlative pieces? I don't want 70 diverse systems that we have to manually sort and rank and try and understand. So again, we just kept adding and developing, and we ended up becoming one of the very first MSP partners for Elastic. And our engineers work with Elastics on a daily basis to develop these modules and to develop all of this ingestion work, because we proved that there's a bigger market for what was going on within an ecosystem like ours. And it is with them that we are looking to enter into the MSSP space. This is the FortiSIM client. We sold the hell out of this. Their FortiSIM, if I turn on everything, we're looking at about 200, maybe 210 event correlation engines across an ecosystem. And this is mine. This is my actual client, Tote Maritime. They're part of a Navy infrastructure. We're looking at over 900 attack vectors real time on behalf of this client. We don't charge them for it. They're helping us to look at how does the model work for an MSP to kind of make that step into an MSSP. And believe me, I'm staying in my lane. I don't want to be something I'm not and something I'm not comfortable with. So we're understanding these larger pieces of how they work together, and it matters. And it goes back to what makes it better and faster and more efficient. And some of that rides on my trusted vendors. So we are doing machine learning and AI. And again, a lot of the large language model and AI corporations you'll read about in the newspaper, they're in my data centers. So we have an advantage about, I don't have to send data out to large language models. Like I don't have to send data out to Microsoft because of Direct Connect. And there's some advantages to having the data center ecosystem that gives us an advantage when we're looking at real-time telemetry and decision-making. So we're building risk reports based on correlative data across 8 or 10 different systems. And from those risk reports, what used to take a SOC analyst perhaps 2 hours, perhaps 2 days, to start to dig in to understand if there's an anomaly, what are we looking at? Now we use the machine learning in seconds, sometimes milliseconds, to give us an attack map of what did we see, what do the anomalies equal, and more importantly, how do those anomalies play into the diverse data feeds and API integration that I'm seeing from my trusted vendors. And this is why I keep saying this, because it matters, because I don't want any one of my ecosystems to be an island. All of them have to work together. The more I can correlate this data and build what I would consider a useful attack map and a useful understanding of the telemetry around TierPoint, the more effective that these systems that we're building are. And now we can see in seconds all the other systems that these systems touch if we see an anomaly. Is it new? No. Is it magic? Absolutely not. But we own that infrastructure. I don't pay a single penny for the extra endpoints that we're looking at across our ecosystem. We took the time to understand the telemetry and to work with these machine models in order to look at how do we best protect our ecosystem and, God willing, keep ourselves out of the newspaper. And we're looking at continuous exposure. This is where some of the magic comes in, and we've made the SOC much more efficient, is that now we just look at drift control. So once we get these systems integrated and onboarded, we have a single pane of glass. If something goes wrong, it's a stoplight. It's red, yellow, green. If everything's within normal limits, we have no drift. You see a nice little green bar on the screen and everything's working the way it's supposed to. So denial of service is one piece that we can't really integrate into this. And I'll explain why. So again, everything that we've tried to do, wanted to do, was how do we integrate you into our ecosystem? And the fastest, most efficient way to do that is with an API. We have our own APIs. We wanted to work with somebody who was going to give us direct access into the telemetry and the attack data coming across my edge. And my edge is big and my edge is ugly sometimes. And I really wanted to add that correlative data back into my ecosystem. So we worked with the incumbent and we built a very large ecosystem. So our model works best because of our network topology and because of the way our clients are deployed. We want inline systems. I want systems in my data centers. I want the ability to scrub and see that data as it's moving across my dark fiber network. And I want to have a failover system that if any of my regional boxes cannot perform or cannot keep up with the volume of the attack, I want to send it to my regional boxes, which are more robust. The less I have to do BGP or the less I need to move any IP spaces, the happier my clients are. And we've got it down to a science of methodology and protocol, but I still don't want to move clients unless it's a true emergency. So looking at the automated protections, what can we do about making sure that this DDoS ecosystem is as robust as possible? And one of the ways we did that is to use our fiber infrastructure. And we don't even start mitigation. We don't even know we have boxes until we reach a 6 gigabit level because, again, we can move traffic around and it's not that big a deal. We needed something that would scale into Azure and AWS because they're in my data centers and clients want to scale into a hybrid model, which is what they're looking at. And we wanted to look at something that I have a big expense every year for Kentech in order to trigger these mechanisms and to allow my DDoS infrastructure to know that here's the level of attack, here's an anomaly, and Kentech is actually making a decision. Another third party is making the decision to tell my expensive DDoS ecosystem it's time to do a level of mitigation, or my security operations team has to go in and manually make the decision. So we have asked about things that would make us better, more efficient for quite a while. And over the last 2 years, we've gotten to the point where my list of what it doesn't do became longer than the list of what it did do. So no API integration. There are APIs, but we're not allowed to see them and we're not allowed to have them. So we've spent hundreds of hours writing custom ingestion scripts in order to sit our collectors in between my own edge that I own and my own core that I own, in order to really understand some of the network telemetry that we needed to look at for denial of service. We wanted 24/7, 365 monitoring. The service levels came down to, we used to get responses to our tickets and inquiries in 5 minutes. Then it became 5 hours, and then it became 5 days, to the point where my team stopped creating service tickets. And we were good enough with the ecosystem that we would just handle what was going on ourselves and do our best to mitigate it until somebody got back to us. Automated DDoS protections, NetFlow again, having to have some other third-party trigger in order to make this happen. Scrubbing centers do not provide for automated failover and integration. Now, we would classify normally these boxes as high availability. And there would be an expectation. I have 7 big boxes in my data center, and we have a baseline protection across our ecosystem that is universal to tier point. We can give you a custom protection profile for you as my client, But my job is to keep the lights on for TierPoint and keep us out of the newspaper. So we've developed very intricate baseline protections based on what region the box sits in and how it operates and what the availability of our dark fiber is across that ecosystem. And the boxes can't communicate with each other in any way that would be high availability. So what we discovered is that we had to copy all of our profiles, move those profiles to a secondary box, have a box in standby based on an attack in one region. Well, the problem with that is that with an ecosystem like ours, it's rare we just get an attack in one region. So we have 750,000 IP addresses that we control and bring into TierPoint's ecosystem. So an attack in one region, we discovered many times, turned into attack in region 2. Region 2 is the box that we chose to be high availability, and the box was no longer configured for our baseline configuration and remediation program. It was based on IP schema and protocols we had designed for region number 1. So then I heard somebody say, "It's brilliant, I'm gonna steal it and own it." The 5-minute attack turned into a 15-minute, is it you? Akamai. So I'm just gonna, that's just mine now. So the 5-minute attack turned into a 15-minute mitigation. We also saw that there was a large attack vector across secure socket layer. So much of the internet is encrypted now. So when we went for our last renewal, we spent about $680,000 extra for SSL card add-ons for every one of these boxes because it was revolutionary technology that was going to allow us to ingest and protect against encrypted SSL traffic without having to have one of my customer certs. Holy shit, that is magic, right? No certs, SSL, inspection mitigation autonomously within the same box. It never once worked. Not only didn't it work, it just doesn't work. It was marketecture. And not only doesn't it work, but when we called the incumbent on it and said, "The hell with these cards, like it doesn't work." And they said, "Well, did you load the certs?" But you don't load the certs. This is magic. It's auto magic and you have some sort of patented technology. Yeah, but you gotta load the certs. So we spent $680,000, which was day one of the decline of my incumbent. I had made a decision at that point that we were going out to the market. And by going out to the market, I mean, there's a large DDoS mitigation company that advertises themselves cloud, and they are in many of my data centers. And the assumption was them knocking on the door that we're your big client, you're just gonna move to us. We understand your pain and you're gonna move to us. We didn't move to them. The final piece was lack of communication. So I'm not sure if everybody's aware, but I think the company I'm talking about is called Radware. And on Christmas morning at 7 o'clock in the morning, I got an email with 960 something clients openly copied, all of us. Everybody saw each other's email address. And the email said, "We're sorry to inform you, but this is CyberTofan." And CyberTofan is an activist group out of the Middle East that is targeting Israeli companies. Tofan is the name of the current Gaza initiative that they've named the Israeli initiative into Gaza. CyberTofan informed us that we certainly hope this isn't the first time you're hearing about this. There was a breach. The data has been out there since, give or take, late October, early November, and there was no notification given to any of the clients that were listed on there. So 2 good things came of this. Number one is I sent emails and gave them the "holy shit, are you kidding me, what's going on?" And just like the 24/7 support, nobody got back to me, and then nobody got back to me, and nobody got back to me. And number two, 960 something clients started talking to each other and comparing notes, and we all sort of had the same playbook that this is unacceptable, and this was somewhat the straw that broke the camel's back. So we had looked at a couple different one incumbent company two other companies. We sell a lot of Imperva. They had a seat at the table. And given my longevity with Carl, he asked if we would look at Corero, and I said we would, with the caveat of, I'm not making the decision in any way under any circumstance. My engineering team and my security operations team, I don't care what color your boxes are. I don't want to look at these things for any reason. My security group, who I trust, are going to make all the evaluations. They're going to look at the technology. They're going to understand the benefits, pros and cons of all these ecosystems, and they're going to tell me which company we're going with. And after many, many months, the security team came back and we said, what are we looking at? Where are we going? And they said, we're going with Corero. So I was quite pleased. And then EJ said, can you sign it today? So it was, it turned into good sales. And I said, well, I'm worried about how we solve the whole 24/7. And EJ's like, we got it. And I'm like, no, you don't understand. Like the 20, and he's like, yeah, we got it. And I said, yeah, how? I don't want to build that team. And he's like, because we have that team. We got it. Like I'm not. So it became an easier conversation. And I think we pushed it through. We got it done in the time we were going to. So we are currently onboarding. My engineering team is quite excited, really disappointed. I spent over 10 years, we calculated about $12.5 million with Radware. And a company that spent that kind of money with me, I would have been on a jet and I would have been talking about things very openly and honestly, which brings me back to, as an entrepreneur and the business of security, these things really matter. And if you shake hands and you give your word and you talk about, here's how we're going to do business and here's the expectation, that handshake better make it to the master service agreement. And if it doesn't make it to the master service agreement, you better default to your handshake, because that's what I've built my career upon. And now after 20 years, you guys want to hear? You have a second? You want to hear why I hate Carl? So 20 years ago, Carl, 20 years ago, I was young in my career for behavioral science, and Carl was running local security in a group. And I came to him, not knowing Carl as an individual, and I said, we need to build a CFR Part 11 compliant storage infrastructure, but there's more than that. It needs to be for new drug discovery, and it needs to have file segregation, check in, check out. It has to have this long list of ideas, and here's how I'm going to do it. And Carl's all right. So he looks at it, he goes, that's not going to work. I'm like, no, it's going to work. And he's like, no, it's not going to. You can't do it at a file level. It has to be, you have to have segmentation of controls and access control higher up the stack. It's a localized install, doesn't matter. Here's how. So we basically shook hands and agreed to disagree. And I went back to my data center and I built exactly what I designed. And the FDA came in to audit me and they said, this is brilliant, but it's not going to work. Wait, is it not going to work because I need to have user segmentation? They're like, yeah, exactly. So if you redesign it that way, you're going to pass. So I licked my wounds and I redesigned it the way, I never gave him credit. I redesigned it. It's true. I redesigned it the way that Carl had told me it needs to be redesigned. The FDA came in, I passed, we built the first CFR Part 11 compliant storage, and that storage is where I stored all my research data that allowed me to sell my company to Harvard Bioscience. So it was a good story all around. So thank you. Thank you for entertaining me for a minute. Any questions? Anybody want to call BS on anything I said? Beautiful. I love when I don't get questions. I get a question. Oh. Akamai. No, what? That's fantastic. I'm jealous of what you guys do in the market.
Ash's presentation, and of course, you're sitting across many boards and also with various companies. In the future, right, when we look at organizational structure, we talked a lot about convergence of technology, and most of the people in the room have seen it swing back and forth. Do you see organizations like bringing together network and apps Or do you still see them segmented 3 to 5 years from now?
I think in the perfect world, we would see them brought in together because it's an easier training model for the machine learning to understand that contained ecosystem. I think it's going to end up being cheaper to host and provide access and content delivery, et cetera. I have yet to walk into a business that we're evaluating where that has been effective. Not only has it not been done, it hasn't even been thought of. So when we look, like if I was building a company from scratch, if I decided to do a startup, I would design that way and we would deliver. But I have yet to see an existing ecosystem just because there's so much segregation of duties and responsibilities, and quite honestly, arm's length throats to choke about where does the problem lie. Is it network? Is it the security stack? Is it the application layer? Application developers don't want you looking at their stuff at all for any reason. It's really like a barbed wire around it. So to integrate them into some of those stacks that allow for ease of patching, maintenance, all the other layers. Like think about patch, how much easier is it gonna be to patch Tuesday? How much easier is it gonna be to patch to have an ecosystem that are reliant on similar libraries? And so, I mean, I can imagine that that's where it's supposed to go. We are not there yet, and I don't know of a company who is genuinely there. I assume Akamai's there, right? So
You're reliable.
I am jealous. Akamai made more yesterday than I made this year, so it's worthy. Any other questions? All right, fantastic. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.